All right, everyone. It looks like we might have peace in our time. We're all hoping so, I'm sure, especially people over there in the Middle East, the Levant region. It looks like Hamas has tacitly signed on to at least some provisions of the Trump-brokered potential peace deal with Israel, and Netanyahu has responded in kind, saying, "Oh, yeah, there's more work to be done," and they are still bombarding parts of Gaza, but they've slowed down over the last 48 hours, which is good. Fewer people dying is generally a good thing. It looks like Hamas is ready to release the hostages. And part of me was reminded of that scene from Return of the King, where they release the prisoners and then they just use the catapults to fire their dead, beheaded heads over the wall into the White City. Yeah, I mean, you could end up with a weird situation like that. It could be that there's a feint of some sort. And keep in mind that both Israel and Hamas don't really want to have to negotiate anything. Hamas wants to be able to rebuild and keep fighting, and Israel wants to effectively occupy Gaza. It's not sure what the final negotiations form would take. The release of hostages, though, I think would calm things down generally and could lead to at least a temporary ceasefire. Israeli troops still rove freely across Gaza. You do still have attacks by Hamas. So the situation is still inflamed. But even a marginal improvement is better than nothing. And the United States, diplomatically speaking, has really taken the fore here. I would note, the leftoids are upset about this. They want the Palestinians to rise up in mass, force out all the Israelis. Zionists in the United States, the neocon class, like, the Lindsey Grahams and so forth. John McCain spinning in his grave right now like a dynamo at the mere mention of peace in any region within that part of the world. They will complain Israel didn't get its comeuppance. It didn't get everything that it wanted. This is called the art of the deal. It's called negotiation. Hardliners within political ideologies have a very, very difficult time of actually negotiating because they want it all and they want it now. They're like Veruca Salt, basically. I want it now. That's basically how they act. This is why they can't get anything done. Politicians paint themselves into corners all the time, drawing red lines and saying, nope, I won't budge on this and I won't budge on that. Nations do too. Israel has been very clear that it's not particularly happy about having to negotiate at all. The attrition diplomatically and economically to Israel, though, has been steep, considering the relatively narrow scope of operations there. The Gaza Strip is not particularly large. Hamas doesn't want to come to the table because they conceive of themselves as the legitimate governing authority of the Gaza Strip. Technically speaking, they are fundamentally correct. This is a mistake that Israel made in the past, by the way. So it's going to take a long time. This does not mean an immediate peace or even a ceasefire. What it does is it helps further negotiations down the road, and it's being brokered mainly by Donald Trump because he actually knows what the hell he's doing. Do you think in a million years, under a continued Biden administration or Harris administration, that you would have seen even this level of progress? I do not think so. I don't think that there would be any progress. A continuing Biden administration run by effectively a shadow government because Biden couldn't even dress himself probably would be unhelpful given this current socio-political situation. And of course, under Kamala Harris, all foreign policy would have fallen apart. It would have been even worse than under Joe Biden because now you've got someone who's out to lunch and a fucking egotistical psycho bitch. I think that would have been somehow worse. Gun to head, I would rather have Biden lead the country, even though he wouldn't be making the decisions, than have Kamala Harris actually able to make decisions and end up making inevitably the wrong ones. With regards to this, saying, of course, and I always have to point this out, I'm not Team Israel or Team Palestine. It's not my part of the world. It's not really any of the U.S. business. But if we can broker peace, instead of slaughtering a bunch of people like we've done under prior administrations when we wanted to get some diplomatic or social outcome, that's responsible. This is the right way to go. And you have to straddle that line again because there's so many hardliners. There are many people in the world that just really hate Israel. There are many people in the world that just really hate Islam. And so it's really difficult it's impossible to appease everyone. That's clearly off the table anytime any negotiations take place in the Levant or in the wider Middle East or South Asia. It's literally impossible. Prior presidents haven't understood the difference between the kind of diplomacy and the kind of culture and the kind of things that are important there But Trump does because he's done business in other parts of the world. He hasn't maintained himself just in North America and Western Europe. So he knows how these things work. The other complication, of course, is that in that region of the world, if you blink, if you back off, and you haven't gotten enough to be able to declare effectively a victory, then you tend to get killed or you get forced out of power. There's some sort of uprising, protests, political intrigue, party gets crushed in the next election and it gets replaced by one that has different ideas. This happens all the time in many parts of the world. It's effectively an endless revolution and counter-revolution, sometimes bloody, sometimes bloodless. It happens constantly throughout that part of the world. If Netanyahu backs off and says, "Oh yeah, we're just going to end this shit," he'll get replaced. He'll get replaced by hardliners that'll continue the war effort later. If Hamas were to back off and say, okay, it's fine if Israelis build a wall around the Gaza Strip and, they run the ports and et cetera, and don't do anything for, reestablishing at least basic order in Gaza, then Hamas would be perceived of as weak. People would probably be stoning them in the streets. So you've got to walk that very, very narrow, fine line when you're in such negotiations. I much prefer that the United States engage in meaningful diplomacy and dialogue with both sides, as opposed to shelling somebody, which is what has typically happened with past administrations. Trump has made it clear we're going to have a big, powerful military and then try not to use it. This is, by the way, exactly what the United States should have. We should have an extremely large, well-armed, and well-equipped militia and a big, beefy military, especially in the naval and air sense, because you have to run those shipping lanes and keep them open. Otherwise, your own people suffer. Letting it metastasize, that's what leads to a full-on out war. And some people don't seem to fully comprehend that sometimes a little bit of conflict prevents a whole lot of conflict down the road. I am no pacifist. I'm just anti-intervention in a general sense. I think that if there's any other option on the table, it should always be used before the shooting begins, whether it's domestic or foreign, by the way. Now, hopefully peace breaks out. That would be wonderful. Also, Trump would reap enormous kudos for securing some sort of relatively tolerable ceasefire and or full-on peace deal. He's doing this partially for personal gain. That's why he's single-mindedly focused on it so often lately. Basically build up the US military and then leer at other people and say, "Step into line, please. No more of the nonsense. Let's stop killing random civilians and taking people hostage and beheading people and bombing cities into piles of rubble because it ain't helpful." And I mean, if you can get some sort of long-lasting deal going in that part of the world, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Trump tried in his first term to secure lasting peace. He made some progress, but then he quickly turned around and went over to Korea because it was easier to deal with the North Koreans than it was with the Israelis or the Palestinian Authority. I thought that that was very, very funny. That pivot was legendary in my mind. Most people didn't even notice it. That's about all. Peace out.